She was a good friend. She was a good teammate. She was a kid with a lot of heart. Rowan, she was always a good player and one you could count on. The school had, of course, made a press release Monday morning that she had actually passed away, and so then the phone started ringing. So I went offline with Kathleen. I said, okay, this is the first one, but if they're calling, it's gonna be coming. So we gotta decide what we're gonna do now. We're either gonna tell them all no, leave us alone, or we're gonna talk about it. And so between the two of us, we said, no, we'll tell her story. This was not something that should have happened, and it should never happen again. It was a lack of knowledge, a lack of education. She herself had postulated that she had a concussion, and she actually Googled to see about concussions and whatnot. And a couple of her friends said, do you really think you have a concussion? And she said, well, I'm not sure. I think maybe. And they went and they searched, and they didn't find the information they needed. They Googled concussion, and then what came up, I guess, it didn't lead them to draw a conclusion that she should stop and go and get looked at. But the fact that they took that step, that drives us a bit now too, is that we have to make sure that when people are going and looking for help or for information or to improve their knowledge, that they're getting the right stuff immediately, and they can recognize that this can be very serious.
Wow, if that education was out there, imagine how many further concussion injuries we could prevent.
We've always taken the prevention as being preventing the catastrophic outcome. You know, the long-term post-concussion syndrome cases where people's lives are devastated, or in Rowan's extreme case, death. We're not going to ever prevent all concussions from ever happening in society, but to prevent the severe long-term catastrophic outcomes, that is possible. If you get at the issue early and you get the proper treatment, you take the proper time that you need to heal and get back to it, you can live without the longer-term consequences in most cases. When another Rowan comes along and they have that injury, that, you know, their friends, their teammates, their parents, their relatives, their coach, their teacher, somebody steps up and says, you need to be looked after, and we're going to sit you down and you're going to get looked after until you're at a point where you can start reintegrating back into your regular life. Then you have to have the frontline medical workers that are trained to recognize and triage the cases that they're going to get, which we don't have right now. The health system needs to adjust, and we have the expertise, we have the Canada has an excellent research base here. Like, we're an embarrassment of riches when it comes to concussion researching. I would venture that 60% of the top papers in the world come out of Canada. So we've got the people here that can do this, and they have to be supported as well. So there's lots of things that need to happen, and we're seeing some things changing. But you kind of have this utopia in your head as to how things are going to evolve into, and you have to have that goal to work towards. We always took the view that we're the first ones that are doing this in Canada. So we want Ontario to be the gold standard.
Right.
And a gold standard is not something that sits there and stays the same. it's the best of whatever it is there is at that point in time.
Right.
So you have to have an evergreening approach and be able to adapt to the improvements that come along to keep your gold standard.
What would be we talked about it a little bit, this end goal?
Rowans Law in every province and territory in Canada. I think Ontario has done the heavy lifting on this. It's been built in a way that it can evolve as information improves, as research improves, as the knowledge base and knowledge translation improves. All of the things that are within that law can evolve with it. But it needs to be consistent across the country. You can't be, going to a tournament in Quebec and have a different set of protocols or codes of conduct or something. You got to be able to say, yeah, it's the same approach. This is the invisible injury that you're not necessarily going to see, the bruise or the cut or anything else, but it can be long-term. And so I really think the health system needs to adjust to this. Players have to declare, players have to speak up. When we look back at Rowan's case, there were so many instances over those 4 or 5 days before she had the catastrophic event where it was obvious with 2020 hindsight that her judgment was way off. She didn't have the capability to judge whether or not she was in bad shape. She really needed us or one of her friends to kind of say, no, you've got to stop and you've got to go and get looked at. She had a driver's test on the Tuesday. The event happened on Wednesday, but on the Tuesday she took her driver's test. At the inquest, they actually had the driver examiner come back, and this was a couple of years prior, but he had pulled the file, and he said, if I didn't know she was a 17-year-old kid, and I looked at what I had written, he said, I would have thought this was an elderly person trying to retain their license because of all the judgmental issues that she had. It was all lack of good judgment. She was pulling out too late or pulling out too soon, or it was just all these things where she should have been able to make the correct calls, and she wasn't able to do it. And that really kind of hit home with us when we heard that. And then a few other stories came out about just little things that at the time you wouldn't have really thought about, but it wasn't really like her. And so, and it's those kind of situations. A teammate or a trainer is gonna know, the trainers have to know the players, and the players have to know each other. So when somebody's not quite themselves, maybe that's the time you need to say, hey, you took a hit in the corner over there. I saw you take a shoulder in the head on the field over there, and you sure you're all right? Just maybe have somebody have a look at you, because they might not be able to even make that call for themselves. You hear so much in the media about the warrior, end of the NHL playoffs. Oh, he played through a fractured forearm, and he did this and he did that. Okay, for a bone, that might be not a huge deal. But when you're talking about your brain, that's a different issue altogether. So I really do think the media also has a role in hyping up the guys that make those proper decisions.
Has your opinion or approach to sports changed at all since the tragic loss of Rowan?
I've been asked several times over the years, if you knew then what you know now, would you have allowed Rowan to play rugby? But that's not really the question in my mind. She loved sports, she loved rugby. We've always taken the approach from day one that there's so much benefit to kids being in sport. They learn so much teamwork. being on time, respect for yourself, others, other teams, how to win and lose. And it's a great life lesson. People still complain a lot about rugby. I still see comments about it. And yeah, it's a rough sport, but what I've seen from rugby in the last 6 years is they've really taken player welfare seriously. Yes, there's been mistakes made, but there's always going to be mistakes made. It's part of the growing, part of the changing. They're going to miss some calls somewhere. They're going to make a bad decision somewhere. But as long as they learn from those and evolve and improve, then it's going to get better. And they've done some really good scientifically based research and made changes to their laws based on that. And they're still going at that. So hockey is making some good changes, particularly at the junior levels. I think you're seeing a change at the NHL level because of the changes that were made at the junior level. The theme that we started at the beginning was it was the cultural change theme. We need to drive that cultural change. So you need to find a way that the system can change, and it has to change now. You know, we have a Rowans Law Day. Concussion education is now part of the health curriculum every year. It's no longer an option in there. It's something that has to be discussed in schools as part of the healthy lifestyles curriculum. That really seem to be having a lot of success in the education side. And that's what's going to drive your cultural change. You're not going to drive your cultural change from the NHLs and the NFLs of the world. That's a whole different ball game, forgive the bad pun. But we can't rely on them to be the leaders on this. Yeah. What's going to drive the change are the kids that are coming through the school system that have been educated from grade 3 to grade 12 every year on how to recognize, how to look out for their friends, how to look out for their family, all this stuff around concussion. And they're going to get into their sports and they're going to say, yeah, this, and if they haven't made the changes they should have made, they're going to drive the change. Mm-hmm. So this is a long-term game. This isn't something that's going to happen overnight, and that's fine. But as long as I'm seeing that those things are being implemented, I'm okay with that. But it's going to take time. Right. But we are going to see that. I have every confidence that the cultural change is going to happen, and a lot of it is going to be driven by the kids that are coming through the education and the sports systems now.